But bringing it down to the context where most of us are, outside of the Bible, and looking at it strictly from a basic point of view, why would you be against the idea of living together?
I think you weaken the fiber of the whole fabric is weakened if the commitment is not there. And I think this, you mentioned self-centeredness. I think that these young people are looking for all of the assets of the marriage situation with none of the liabilities. And this comes from selfishness. And I think that getting back to the theme of what builds a strong family, there has to be a good modicum of selflessness rather than selfishness.
Well, I would think, rather than using the word liabilities when you talk about living together, and I think there are undoubtedly a number of couples who can live together and have a vibrant relationship. I think it's possible. But I think by and large, what can happen is you can want the assets, but without the full investment, rather than liability, because I think what for me would have to be the factor in a situation like that is, with the strange thing of personal development, how can I be committed to somebody? How can I grow as an individual being committed to somebody if there isn't the full commitment there? Because I think what happens is the individual is made in such a way that in order for us to truly blossom and open ourselves, there has to be this thing called security. And I think even though, as people say, marriage is often simply a piece of paper, and that's really the difference between being married and not being married, that there's more than that. Because what happens is that piece of paper can say, gay, even though you may get angry with your wife on those rare occasions when perhaps it ever happened, even though you may get angry and the temptation is, say, end of it, that legal document sort of says, okay, come on, think again, and as you resolve the conflict, you grow deeper and deeper and deeper into the relationship. Whereas if there isn't that kind of a tie, often the individual can say, well, why bother? Goodbye, I'll try someone else.
Well, I'll modify what I said earlier to the extent that if the couple have pledged themselves to each other in a manner comparable to the marriage vows, that yes, I think that if there is that till death do us part, not only intent but commitment, then I think that perhaps Deuteronomy 23 is a little too stern for that kind of a couple. But from what I hear, this is not the case in many of these. This is an act of convenience and an act of selfishness rather than selflessness.
Well, say we pick up this thing that you talk of as a selfishness. I think when we look at our society versus the one in which you grew up, one of the key dilemmas that works in nearly every area is what I call the instamatic society. That so often we want things, we want it now. We want the results now. We want the benefits right now. We want solutions right now. And I think the strange thing about human relationships is that doesn't happen that way. That in terms of security, in terms of benefit, all of these things, that commitment takes a long time to develop and grow and mature. And the analogy of the plant is a good one, that it takes a long time for something to grow, and the fruit comes at the end of a fairly lengthy period. And I think the dilemma is, with so many people looking for the quick solution, the quick result, is that they get terribly frustrated and disillusioned in the middle of it all, and they say, the heck with that. Maybe this individual obviously is wrong. I'll use the back door. Quit the relationship and go and find somebody else and see if that works. How would you advise somebody who was really caught in the idea of the instamatic society?
Well, I think that the younger generation has perhaps had some painful experiences out of the economic downturn, the slump, the deep recession that we've just come through. I think that many, and some of my own children have done so, who equip themselves with one or two cars and one or two TVs and one or two of everything. And the salary scales were climbing, and the bonuses were good, and it all looked as if they had mortgaged themselves to the extent that they could still manage it. But it comes the day of reckoning, and the salary increases don't keep up with the rate of inflation, and interest costs go skyrocketing, and the costs of these things come home to roost. I think that you build slowly if you're going to build well. And I think that you build slowly in family relationships if you're going to build well.
Well, say we look back at how things were when you were building, and looking back on you as a young boy now, in your family in Fort William, trying to figure out what are some of the key influences that worked within your life at that time. What were some of the really standout things that marked your family life?
Well, I was fortunate. I had great example in my parents. I have enormous respect for them, and they did provide the loving, caring, concerned atmosphere that prompted. There were 7 of us children. Only 4 of us made it through babyhood. 3 of the family passed away at very early age. And I guess if the wonders of today's medicine had been available, they might have made it through. But the underlying all of this situation was a comprehension, a feeling of the strength of the faith of my parents. I saw it in my grandparents and how it tided them through the tough situations. And I certainly saw it manifest deeply in my parents. And I'm grateful for that heritage.
How about telling the viewers the experience when your younger brother is seriously ill, Bobby?
Young Bobby he was just a darling little boy. He had some kind of a blood infection, and I never learned what it was. Indeed, I don't know that the doctors ever knew. But he was being treated at home. I watched my father give Bobby a blood transfusion. And just after that, the doctor came to the family and said, look, the child's not going to make it. My mother called the rest of the family in to another room. We all knelt in prayer for Bobby. Mother's request was that God help the baby make it. But then she wound up, nevertheless, if it's not to be, thy will be done. Mother was able to take the shocks because of this faith and belief in her religion. And I think I've inherited a little bit of that. And I hope I've passed some of that on to my children.
Do you think that it's easier to have faith in the kind of simple society in which you grew up rather than the sort of society we have now?
Oh, I think unquestionably the pressures, the rate of change has been accelerating through the 3 generations that I have watched. Indeed, I'm starting to watch the 4th generation. And I think it takes different kinds of skills to be able to manage and adapt and adopt the accelerating rate of change. It's an explosion of new technology that is affecting it. It is, while they're talking about the impact it will have on future employment, it's a frightening thing, but that's what mankind faces. He'd better learn how to cope with it and to manage it, and because it'll come.